All right, welcome back. So when federal crimes happen in Minnesota, things like terrorism, fraud, immigration violations, cyber crimes, you name it, the U.S. Attorney is the one who goes after it. And for 6 years, that has been Mr. Andy Luger. Thank you so much for joining us today. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is a great opportunity for us just to be able to just do a little bit of a debrief with you and talk about your time as U.S. Attorney, because you had so much going on during those 6 years. Just to kind of set the stage, if I could, your position is appointed. So you were brought in by President Obama.
First by President Obama, and then I left for 5 years and came back under President Biden.
Yeah, and so we're going to try to talk about some of the things that happened while you were in office. And I'm curious, though, while you were U.S. Attorney, what were some of your priorities, and how do you think you did?
I'll give my own grade.
Okay.
All right, so I've never done that before. The second time, this most recent time, the top priority, as we made clear over and over again, was violent crime. Minneapolis, Minnesota had gone through a crime wave that we've never seen before. And so when I came into office in 2022, we were sort of at the peak, and it was clear that we had to do everything we could to address violent crime. So that was the number one priority.
Can we just dig in just a little bit to gangs? Because one thing that was in the headlines, even just fairly recently, was the prosecution of more than 100 gang members using the federal racketeering laws. So first, can you talk through just what that means for people who might not understand RICO, not understand the process, and why that was so impactful?
Sure, and I can't imagine that anybody doesn't understand RICO, or I'm joking.
Okay, I was going to say.
So I started my career you'll be one.
Yeah.
I started my career in 1989 in Brooklyn as a federal prosecutor. Yeah. The office that I was in at the time was very focused on prosecuting mob families and dismantling organized crime in New York. So I got to see the RICO statute, which was created in the late 60s to address organized crime at work. And I saw how it worked. And you can literally take apart an organization by prosecuting the entire family or the entire organization. It's very effective. It's hard to do, and it takes extra work. When I came back to being U.S. Attorney in 2022, and I saw the rise of the street gangs, particularly in Minneapolis, I wanted to use that statute, which I had seen used so effectively in New York, here. And other U.S. attorneys were doing the same thing in their cities in 2022, 2023, and it worked. We were able to address the highs and the lows on the north side, the bloods on the south side, with this powerful statute that takes a series of murders, series of assaults and shootings, wraps it up into one indictment, and people get convicted and go to prison for a long time.
Can we step back from that just for a second, and can you give us kind of a lay of the land of the gang situation here? Because I think for a lot of people who don't have, they don't cross worlds with that, they may look at it and go, a rise in gang violence, and it just may be very abstract to them.
Sure. Prior to 2020, I moved here from New York in 1992. Prior to 2020, Minneapolis, Minnesota was not known for violent crime. If you had to give us a grade in terms of crime, we would get an A. We were just a low crime state and a low crime city. That's a good thing. After the murder of George Floyd, after the riots, and after the depletion of the Minneapolis Police Department, gangs that had always existed, sort of street groups, really flourished. They saw an opportunity to recruit. They saw an opportunity to sell fentanyl, to engage in fraud, to do the kinds of things they wanted to do to enrich themselves and to empower themselves. And there really wasn't much being done about it. Courts were closed for part of the time. And again, as I said, the police department was depleted. I came in with the idea of taking them on head on, using local, federal, and state resources, building a consensus and a coalition to take these gangs down. What people understand that they may not connect to gangs is the fact that we saw a rise in murders, shootings, and carjackings. If I don't know how long you've lived here, but
my whole life, yeah.
I never dealt with carjackings before. I've been a federal prosecutor here on and off for years. Never saw carjackings, never prosecuted a carjacking case. Minneapolis went from not tracking carjackings to reporting 650 carjackings in 2021 alone. we had to do something about that.
Okay.
And so we took on the carjackers, we took on the gangs, which were related in some instances to the carjackings, and just sent a very strong signal that none of this would be tolerated. And federal law enforcement has a significant impact.
Mm-hmm. So when you're when you're so focused on violent crime, how do you balance the other crimes? Because things like, fraud, white collar crime, these types of things maybe aren't so heavily focused on, and then are people sort of how do you balance all of that?
Sure. We had a series of meetings amongst law enforcement when I first came in. Clearly, we wanted to focus on violent crime. The Feeding Our Future case had just broken. We hadn't indicted anybody yet, but that investigation was ongoing. We knew we had to take that on in a serious way, and we did. The question is, what can you have other people deal with that we would normally deal with? There are a lot of what I would call lower level crimes that our office and most U.S. attorneys' offices routinely did. We took a step back on that to put more of our attention and time on violent crime and on the large frauds.
Okay, and you feel good about that, sort of the head of the snake in a lot of ways? You feel like you would do that again? I
would do exactly what we did again. I would do even more going forward. And I think the office is. So we're nowhere near out of the woods on violent crime. Yeah. It's going to take another couple of years. My sense is that the office will continue to do that work, and the same thing with fraud.
Okay. Speaking of fraud, I'm very curious, when you inherited Feeding Our Future, at what point did you realize what you had?
So there were search warrants done in January of 2022. I got sworn in March of 2022. Like everybody else, I watched the news and I saw search warrants being executed, and I could see the headlines. I was able to read those warrants, and as somebody who's been writing and reading warrants on and off for my whole career, I got a pretty good idea of what was what. Yeah. The day I started in March of 2022, I sat down with the prosecutor, Joe Thompson, who was leading that case, and with the FBI to find out what kind of scope are we looking at, and it was almost overwhelming.
Was there any emotion that you had at all?
I have a lot of emotions. So the most important thing that we did is talked about, where are we going to take this? We needed to build a larger team. We needed to dedicate more resources to it, and that's exactly what we did. So Joe, who was the lead prosecutor, needed a whole group of people around him, as did the FBI and others. We built that team and then set out on a course, ultimately indicting 70 people for this fraud.
Yeah. As you take a look now at the next, 3-ish years or so with a different, U.S. attorney, somebody who's going to be appointed by the Trump administration, what are some of your worries and concerns, and then what are some of your hopes?
So I don't really have concerns. We're all professionals, and whoever takes that job next I expect will do a great job. Will focus on the things that he or she believes are important. But clearly, the focus on violent crime and the kinds of frauds that we were investigating along with Feeding Our Future will be at the top of anybody's list. I never tell anybody what to do. I didn't want anybody to tell me what to do. So I'll support that work. I'm available to help educate anybody on what we were doing, but frankly, the office is in great hands. The leadership of that office is still in place. The cases that we charged are still going to trial. There's a gang trial that's going to start shortly, one of the RICO trials, and there'll be more Feeding Our Future trials.
Yeah. Would people be surprised to know just how many cases cross over into the federal jurisdiction? I mean, I can't even imagine how many could just touch.
So most of what can be prosecuted at the state level, everything from child pornography to drugs and guns, can be prosecuted federally. We try to choose, U.S. Attorney's Office tries to choose its cases carefully and focus its resources where they can have the most impact. That's what we did when I was there.
As you look back on your time now, what stands out to you as sort of the most memorable, either good or bad, moment, case?
So when I was U.S. Attorney under President Obama, we were able to prosecute the man who murdered Jacob Wetterling. And there's very little in my life that will, take the place of that. They tell you, and I teach this to prosecutors, you try to bring your emotions out of a case and think logically and carefully and objectively about a case. That's one where I failed at that. We all got very emotional. We got to know the family, and we knew how important it was to the state to bring justice to the Wetterling family. And so that one sticks out and always will.
Can I ask you just a little bit more about that, because that is a case that a story in a family that has really had such an emotional, personal impact with so many Minnesotans. Can you take us just behind the scenes of that just a little bit and share what you can about the process and that coming together for you?
Sure. Every U.S. attorney since 1989 has wanted to play a role, if possible, in helping to solve that case. FBI, the local sheriff, the police officer, the BCA, everybody wanted to solve that case. I got a phone call one day saying, we think we know who did it. And while we can't prove the murder right now, we can prove that he was in possession of child pornography. We have very tough child pornography laws at the federal level, and the idea was to charge him with the child pornography, hoping that he would lead us to what he did and where he buried Jacob Wetterling. And we had a long year waiting for him to do that while he faced our charges, and he ultimately did.
Wow. Have there been cases where you want to get there, you're really close, but you just can't get over the finish line with it?
Always.
Okay, you have some examples?
Yeah, that's for next time. No, I'm kidding. I've had a number of cases where, mostly fraud cases, where you had a pretty good idea what happened and who did it. And we operate under strict guidelines. If we don't think we can win a trial, we don't bring a case. So you hate, yes, I have those, and they live with me. I'm very competitive, and I want to be able to get across the finish line. There are some that you're just never going to do, and you shouldn't. If you can't make the case, and you can't say, I can win this in court, you shouldn't bring it. And so I'm actually proud of the fact that we didn't bring the cases that shouldn't have been brought. I'm going to ask you just a little bit more of a slightly personal question. You don't have to answer if you don't want, but I'm curious what sacrifices you have had to make in your time as U.S. Attorney, because it is, I can't imagine, an all-encompassing job. It's not something you can go home and sort of just leave at the office. And that's both a sacrifice and a blessing. To have a job that's with you 24 hours a day because you believe so much in it, and because you're so invested in what you're doing. Yes, it's a sacrifice, because when everybody's watching the soccer game that your kid's in and your mind is elsewhere, I get that, but that's one of the great privileges of my life, to be able to do that and know that I'm helping people, whether it's the Wetterling family or the state of Minnesota more generally on violent crime and fraud. I never hesitated to take this job, and I would do it all over again in an instant. Really? Yes. Wow. How's the adjustment been to private practice? Well, it's a complete change. Private practice is completely different than being in the government. I love what I do as a lawyer, so I have always loved private practice. It's just very different. And I have clients who rely on me, need me, want me to represent them, and that's also a tremendous privilege. It's why I became a lawyer. I failed at art and music and decided that maybe law was something I could do, but to have people trust you with whatever their problem is a great honor. Yeah. I kind of want to circle back to what you hope your, legacy is going to be, assuming this is the last time we're going to see you in this position. And then I'm going to push you on a grade, because you didn't give me a grade earlier. Well, I'll give you my grade, and whoever's watching can text in their grade. I think my legacy, I hope my legacy is that government works, that government can work, and we can do a good job. Crime is the area that I've focused a bunch of my career on, And we were very public about what we did. We did press conferences, things like this. The reason I'm here now and the reason we were so public about our cases is I want people to believe in their government. And whether we were successful in every case or not, I wanted people to know what we were doing for them. That I want to be my legacy. I want my legacy to be that we did well for the people of Minnesota and we got to tell them what we were doing. Whether they liked it or not, they know what their government's doing, and I think we did a great job.
Okay. A minus, B?
So I'm not big on the minuses. I'll say it's not an A+. There are things that we didn't get to do.
Yeah.
I think we got a good head start on the violent crime, a good head start on the fraud, and we worked hard. And it's not just me. I'm very proud of the office that I led and the people who are still there doing the hard work every single day. I'd give them an A. I would give me a B+.
Very good. Fair enough. Yeah, you hope when you come in, you left the office better than when you.
That's my goal.
Came in, so
thank you for having me.
I appreciate your time, Andy Luger. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. All right, we'll be right back after this.